Hello, my dear friends. Uh, I have I don't know if you call it sad duty, but I have the duty to inform all of you of a very simple fact. The President of the United States of America is a pervert. Understand what I just said. The President of the United States of America is a pervert. Now, you just don't say something like that without backing it up.
When James Carville takes aim at Donald Trump, it's never just a debate, it's a demolition. The veteran strategist peels back Trump's carefully built persona, exposing not a leader of strength, but a figure driven by ego, remembered less for direction than for disorder. Carville doesn't simply point out Trump's flaws, he etches them into memory, portraying him as a tired rerun nobody wanted to see again. And for a man consumed with legacy, few insults cut deeper than being branded irrelevant.
Dramatic here, but at 1 o'clock on the 17th of January of 2024, I raised a question and pointed out that they were red splotches on Donald Trump's hands, and that could be professional, a sign of syphilis, a venereal disease, a tertiary syphilis, and which can have profound effects if not treated.
James Carville doesn't merely criticize Donald Trump. He dissects him with the precision of a seasoned surgeon who's seen this case before and knows exactly where the decay sets in. Yes, Trump may sit in the Oval Office as President of the United States, but in Carville's eyes, he's less a commander-in-chief and more a cautionary tale wrapped in red ties and spray tan. When Carville strikes, he isn't leaving bruises, he's carving scars that won't ever fade.
So Trump has gone out of his way to tell us he's a pervert. He's talked about, this is very difficult, I hate to bring this up, but we got to do this. His youngest daughter, I think her name was Tiffany, and was fantasizing about her breast when she was in.
From the very beginning, Carville zeroes in on Trump's obsession with appearances. For a man who preaches strength and dominance, his entire persona is built on smoke and mirrors. Carville exposes the absurdity of a president who values crowd sizes and TV ratings over the actual work of governing. In Carville's telling, Trump's presidency isn't about leading a nation, it's about headlining a never-ending vanity show, where applause always outranks policy.
This is a supplement to what I just did, because I think I brought up a really, really important point here. And, you know, sometimes you always have to evaluate the conclusions you drew because maybe they were erroneous conclusions. And so one of the things that we know for sure is Donald John Trump stinks. In other words, he smells like.
The Louisiana-born strategist wastes no time in casting Trump as a walking caricature of political dysfunction. Every move, Carville argues, comes from the insecurities of a man desperate for validation yet allergic to responsibility. It's as if Trump is forever auditioning for the role of president in his own mind, while the nation is left watching the blooper reel. Carville sharpens this imagery into a weapon, warning that when history writes its verdict, Trump won't be remembered for achievements, but for the chaos he unleashed.
Then he talked on Howard Stern about having sex with his oldest daughter. Come on, man. I'm not that sheltered. I'm 80 years old, all right? I've been around the world once. I've been to Arkansas twice. I've seen and heard a lot of shit in my life. I have never, ever heard of anybody fantasizing about having sex with their daughter. You're a perp.
Carville has a particular talent for ripping apart Trump's so-called business legacy. He never misses a chance to remind audiences that Trump isn't a self-made mogul but a man buoyed by inherited wealth, rescued by bankruptcies, and hooked on branding over substance. In Carville's eyes, Trump's empire isn't a monument to success, it's a museum of failure, gilded with gold-plated illusions. And the notion that this man built his own path to the presidency, Carville calls it the greatest con of them all.
Fiasco in Canada, where there was a G7 meeting, and of course he can't stay because, frankly, they don't give a shit about him anymore. He was not the center of attention, And then he holds a press conference with the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, of which he has some empty pages that are blowing in the fucking wind that don't have anything.
And then there's Trump's political style, or the lack of one. Carville reminds us that true leaders build coalitions, solve problems, and steer through crises. Trump, by contrast, builds feuds. He feeds on division the way an arsonist feeds on flames. Carville doesn't mince words when mocking a president who treats Twitter tantrums like official policy memos. That isn't leadership, he says, it's performance art, and the punchline lands hardest on anyone who ever expected more. Carville's roast cuts even deeper when he highlights Trump's brittle ego. For a man who parades toughness, Trump shatters at the slightest blow. Carville nails the contradiction, a president quick to hurl insults at opponents, yet collapsing into self-pity the moment he's hit back. It's what Carville calls a political glass jaw. He talks like a heavyweight, but one clean jab sends him spiraling into endless rants about unfair treatment. To Carville, the irony is too perfect, a man desperate to be seen as a lion, yet forever acting like a wounded house cat.
This man is repetitively, publicly fantasized about having sex with underage females. He was actually asked, well, what age limit you wouldn't go before? And I think his consensus number was 12. Yeah, that's right. Look it up. That's what he said. So again, I'm not being Clarence Darrow or Louis Brandeis or something. It's a division against interest.
Carville also zeroes in on Trump's troubled relationship with the truth, or, more accurately, his allergy to it. He paints Trump as the first president whose daily routine could double as a game of two truths and a lie, except without the truths. From exaggerated accomplishments to flat-out fabrications, Carville ridicules Trump's gift for lying so effortlessly that even fact-checkers eventually surrendered. In his cutting words, Trump doesn't just twist reality. He swaps it out for whatever fantasy flatters him in the moment. And the real punchline? His followers applaud as if delusion itself were a political platform. One of Carville's sharpest attacks lands on Trump's obsession with loyalty. Not respect. Not competence. Just blind loyalty. In Trump's world, cabinet members, aides, and allies aren't judged by skill but by their ability to shower him with praise. Carville frames it as less of a presidency and more of a cult of personality, where kneeling gets rewarded and questioning gets punished. It's not the Oval Office, he says, it's a reality TV boardroom, where people live in fear of being fired with a catchphrase instead of policy. Carville also rips into Trump's so-called rhetorical style, if it can even be called that. Presidents are usually remembered for speeches that inspired, unified, or challenged the nation. Trump, by contrast, is remembered for rambling monologues that sound like they were pieced together from late-night infomercials. Carville mocks the idea that these disjointed tirades ever counted as leadership. Where Lincoln gave America the Gettysburg Address, Trump gave it word salad sprinkled with grievances.
Event. I do not, I guess Trump is human in one sense, in another sense he's not. I really think he is such an odious and despicable man that he should not be accorded the most basic courtesies that one human being would extend to another.
The roast doesn't let up there. Carville tears into Trump's obsession with grievance politics, mocking the way he constantly paints himself as the eternal victim of shadowy enemies. For a man who lives in the White House and commands the most powerful military on earth, Trump somehow manages to spin himself as the underdog in every story. Carville ridicules the absurdity of a billionaire president whining about unfairness as if life had cheated him out of success. The truth, Carville says, is simple. Trump never stopped campaigning as an outsider because he never figured out how to govern as an insider. Then comes the matter of Trump's policy record, or the gaping lack of one. Carville calls out how grand promises, from infrastructure to healthcare, collapsed the second they faced reality. He skewers the empty slogans, the half-baked proposals, and the endless photo ops designed to distract from the absence of real achievement. In Carville's eyes, Trump's presidency is a masterclass in wasted opportunity. 4 years spent chasing headlines instead of history. What remains is a legacy defined not by progress but by pettiness, where the loudest theatrics drowned out the most important work.
I think we have to consider the fact, not the fact, we have to consider the possibility, I want to be very careful with my language here, that Trump is unable to wipe his ass. Yeah, you heard me. It is possible that this man is incapable of wiping his own ass.
Carville's most devastating strike, however, goes beyond politics. It's personal. He casts Trump not as an agent of change, but as a symptom of America's addiction to spectacle. Trump didn't invent celebrity politics. He simply exploited it better than anyone else. But Carville warns that spectacle always burns out. What once seemed bold and disruptive now feels stale and desperate. The endless rallies, the recycled slogans, the same tired grievances, they no longer shock, they simply bore. In Carville's words, Trump has shifted from showman to rerun, and nothing kills a performer faster than losing the crowd. And while Trump may still sit in the presidency, Carville argues that the aura of inevitability has cracked. Even loyal supporters whisper doubts, worn down by the fatigue of chaos without progress. Carville paints Trump as a man trapped in the past, endlessly relitigating old battles because he has no vision for the future. That, he insists, is the death knell of any politician. Leaders point forward, con men point backward. And in choosing the latter, Trump has doomed his legacy.
I think he is a grotesque, immoral man who is incapable of understanding anything or anybody that's not him. And I'll just be very honest, I cannot stand the son of a bitch. But we've been a lot of people and say you really shouldn't use this language, and I'm trying to think of what can I do to accommodate some of these people, and what I can do is this. I am no longer going to say he can't wipe his ass. I'm going to be sophisticated.
Carville closes his roast with the cutting observation that Trump's greatest accomplishment was convincing people he was more than he ever was. Strip away the branding, the bravado, the rallies, and the bluster, and what's left is a deeply insecure man whose reach always exceeded his grasp. A man who could never live up to the image he sold, yet demanded the country play along with the performance. To Carville, that is the real tragedy of Trump's presidency, not just what he failed to accomplish, but what he revealed about how easily spectacle can deceive. For Carville, the takedown is absolute. Trump isn't simply a flawed leader, he's a contradiction in motion, a parody of power, a man who craved the title but never understood the job. And once that image takes root, it's almost impossible to erase. Trump can keep shouting, keep rallying, keep proclaiming his greatness, but Carville has already planted the seed of doubt that lingers long after the words fade. The great showman, he argues, has been unmasked as an ordinary man who mistook applause for authority. And in the end, Carville's destruction cuts deeper than politics or policy. It pierces the very mythology Trump built around himself.
So I'm sorry, but to the 10% that said, well, I voted for change, I didn't vote for this, then you are a goddamn idiot. And what my favorite group of people are these Wall Street Trump supporters, these guys worth $6 gazillion. Well, I didn't know he was going to do this. I was surprised that they wasn't thought out. What the fuck has he ever done in his life that's ever been thought out?
By exposing the emptiness behind the brand, Carville strikes Trump in the one place he values most, his image. For a man who lives and breathes perception, nothing is more devastating than being seen for what he truly is. Carville doesn't simply criticize Trump. He dissects him like a seasoned surgeon who's handled this patient before and knows exactly where the rot begins. Yes, Trump may occupy the highest office in the land, but to Carville, he's less a commander-in-chief and more a cautionary tale dressed up in red ties and spray tan. When Carville goes to work, he's not after bruises, he's carving scars that don't fade. From the outset, Carville zeroes in on Trump's obsession with image. For a man who constantly preaches strength and dominance, his entire persona rests on smoke and mirrors. Carville exposes the absurdity of a president who measures worth not by governance but by crowd sizes and TV ratings. In his telling, Trump's presidency isn't about leading a nation, it's about starring in a never-ending vanity project where applause always comes before policy.
I do want to press you on one thing, and I appreciate that you've criticized the left wing of your party, James. I truly do.
Right.
And I think that you're right when you say leaning into gender identity and pronouns and the feminine nature of the current message of Democrats is a loser. I have to tell you, James, I also think it's a loser to do something that you have done, and that is to constantly equate President Trump to Hitler, constantly equate this to an authoritarian regime. I think you've got to find a positive message and stop hyperventilating over the dystopian future of America.
I don't know, but there's a lot of evidence to say that Trump, shall we say, has a favorable view of some of these things.
Oh, James.
And I will continue to bring it up, and I always appreciate to be on Fox when I can bring it up to Fox viewers so they can judge how admiring that Donald John Trump is of National Socialism. That's fine.
Okay.
The Louisiana-born strategist doesn't hesitate to paint Trump as a living caricature of political dysfunction. Every move, Carville argues, flows from the insecurities of a man desperate for validation but allergic to responsibility. It's as if Trump is forever auditioning for the role of president in his own head, while the rest of the nation is left watching the blooper reel. Carville wields this imagery like a weapon, warning that when history is written, Trump will be remembered less for achievements and more for the chaos he left behind. Carville also has a particular gift for dismantling Trump's business record. He delights in reminding audiences that Trump is no self-made tycoon, but a man lifted by inherited wealth, rescued by bankruptcies, and hooked on branding over substance. To Carville, Trump's empire isn't a monument to success, it's a museum of failure, coated in gold-plated illusions. And the notion that this man built his way to the presidency? Carville calls it the greatest con of them all.
Trump's more ahead than he's ever been. It's going the wrong way. It's not working. Everything that we're throwing is spaghetti at a wall, and none of it is sticking, me included. And, you know, we gotta try to think of something different, because what we're doing is really.
And then there's Trump's political style, or more accurately, his lack of one. Carville stresses that real leaders build coalitions, solve problems, and guide their nations through crises. Trump, by contrast, builds feuds. He feeds on division the way an arsonist feeds on flames. Carville spares no words in mocking the absurdity of a president who treats Twitter meltdowns as if they were official policy briefings. That isn't leadership, he says, it's performance art, and the joke falls hardest on anyone who ever expected more. Carville sharpens the roast further by targeting Trump's inability to handle criticism. For a man who constantly brags about toughness, Trump is fragile to the point of parody. Carville hammers the contradiction, a man quick to throw insults at opponents, yet collapsing into self-pity the moment anyone fires back. He calls it political glass jaw syndrome. Trump talks like a heavyweight, but one clean jab sends him spinning into endless rants about unfair treatment. To Carville, the irony is delicious, a man desperate to look like a lion, yet forever behaving like a wounded house cat.